So Representative Blackburn, as soon as you sit down, we'll start our meeting. All right, Danielle, when you want to take us live, feel free.
Mr. Chairman, you are live.
Not my turn to watch him. All right, good morning, Joint Corporations Committee. Welcome to our topic, our interim discussion topics, our discussion on interim topics. That's what we're doing this morning. And so as you all have in front of you, a list passed out by our staff. These were the topics that were proposed by several of you. One note, as I've found in my other committees, the way it worked is any person could submit a topic and pick a legislator's name. So I know there are at least 2 people on this list who did not request the topic. So as you know, you have to assign it to a certain member of the committee. And I've already had a couple of people saying, I have no idea where that came from, including Representative Blackburn. Apparently you don't want to secede, which is probably a good thing. So just for people in the public and people in the committee, if you see a topic and there's a legislator's name, it doesn't necessarily mean that they asked for it or even aware that it was asked for under their name, is what we're finding on a couple of in my other committee as well. So with that, Mr. Co-Chairman, welcome to the House Corporations Room. If it's okay, I thought we'd just take some public comment from agencies and industry on topics they'd like to consider that may not be on the list. And then if that works, and we can go around as a committee and discuss things on the list. And
sounds good. You all agree I have a weighted vote of 5, right?
I'm not sure where your compatriots are, but until they get here, we will hold down the fort in the House. So any agencies here wish to talk about anything for the interim? That is kind of fascinating.
Real quick.
I don't see a single agency in the room. They're on the Zoom. Let's bring in Mr. Rude from the Department of Insurance. Morning, Jeff.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate your time. Chairman Zwanitzer, Co-Chair Driscoll. My name is Jeff Root. I'm the Insurance Commissioner. We have one topic we'd like the committee to consider. We'd like to update and modernize our producer licensing statutes. That's something we've been trying to get around to for some time. We have to update some definitions and bring some consistency with licensing fees for residents and non-residents. We'd like to remove some outdated requirements. And we'd really like to rework the continuing education statutes, in particular to reflect the use of third-party vendors. Everybody uses them now, but when our statutes were written, they were really written with hard copy manual transactions in mind. And ultimately, we just want to make it more efficient and a little bit easier on our agents. So with that, that's the one topic we'd like y'all to consider. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
You don't have any NAIC accreditation bills this year?
No, Mr. Chairman, we are fortunate and we're just happy we don't.
Me too. All right. Thank you, Commissioner. Any questions?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Rude, reinsurance that we've been dealing with a little, does that need to be an interim topic, or can we just handle that with a bill?
Mr. Chairman, Co-Chairman Driscoll, are we referring to a 1332 waiver for reinsurance for the Affordable Care Act, or are you thinking of something else?
No, talking about, we've had conversation. I know you had some with a couple of reinsurance companies, maybe more coming to Wyoming. We're doing a sandbox bill into this session, and is that worthy of an interim topic, or is it just a simple bill?
Mr. Chairman, I think we can consider it. We're in the very, very beginning stages. We're going to be working with them, whether it's an interim committee or not. We're going to be working with them to see what they propose. We're still waiting for the first initial proposal, so it's kind of hard for me to say we're prepared to go forward with something to the committee. Now, if the companies may want that because they have something to go forward, but I haven't seen it yet.
Okay, you'd be amicable if it came up as a topic, though.
I'd be happy to bring it forward if once we see it and we've got something to give you.
Very good. Thank you.
Any questions for insurance? Seeing none, I don't see any other state agencies in the room. So if it's easy enough for everyone, maybe we'll just start on one side of the room and go across. That works for everybody. Let's start on the left side. Hi, Ms. Simmons. Anything for interim for corporations? I know I put you on the hot side. Nope. No, it's good. Yeah, if anybody already submitted something and wants to talk about it, that would be great as well. We'll kind of go through the room and then online and then go through the committee of any topics and make sure I hit them all. And if not, I'll try to mention them on the interim proposed list and have the discussion. Go ahead, Gail.
Gail Simmons, Civics 307. I do a nonpartisan blog on the legislature and on civics in general in the state. There's a few here that I find really, really good. I would like to point out that if you go to page 9, where Deputy Secretary of State has put one in, that's actually several topics under there. In addition, on the election runoffs, there are separate topics that were submitted in the same area: Beitman, Simmons, and Zwanitzer. So she's done a broader view. I think that her topics are too big for a single topic. So I think that election code revision specifically around runoff elections is a really good one. There's still some question. Do we actually even need them? That's always the first question. And then if we need them, then take a look at what form that might take, and really look into the various forms of primary elections throughout the country, as well as the world. Maybe instant runoff, maybe something else, but I think that's worth it. I really like the first one that Representative McGuire put in on the lobbyists. In fact, that's another one where there's a topic later on lobbyists, including I'm not sure who put it in, but in effect, what are appropriate actions and declarations and some transparency around lobbying, who the lobbyist is, the activities that they have. That includes that dark money reporting requirement reform, I think, as well. And then the last one is on the review of powers of the major political parties. I think that it's become a pretty squishy kind of, I don't know if you saw the news article lately, and a question comes up: to what extent does the state have an interest in what happens with the parties right now? We have a statute, or we have statutes around that. There are major party state bylaws and local bylaws, and the question becomes, what is that interest of the state, and what are the powers and the capabilities, restrictions, and requirements around that? So I think it's really, really important, and particularly now when such a majority of the state is in one party, it's even more important that there be transparency and clarity around responsibility. So with that, I stand for questions.
Question? Seeing none. Thanks, Gail. Mr. Winnie, thoughts?
Mr. Chairman, Bill Winnie, topic on service and improvement district limitations. Basically, and this, much as your question to the insurance commissioner, this could probably be just straight up brought through a bill. But the basic idea is that service improvement districts would be limited to what their founding documents proposed until they're taken to a vote by the voters. And there's a statutory ability to do that. And subject to your questions, well, I did talk to Senator Nethercott, who's sponsoring it, before I put it in. So there's no surprise there. Subject to your questions, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Winnie. Nuts. Any questions at this time? Certainly put on the list. Mr. Odekoven.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Byron Odekoven, the Executive Director for the Wyoming Sheriffs and Chiefs. Not rising with a specific topic for you to consider, reacting to the list a little bit, and would welcome some of the discussion. Having to do with lobbyists and expenditures and how that may work. And provide, and my goal would be to provide some of the other side of the discussion. Probably, it appears to be focused on governmental folks, although I represent only governmental folks, but in the form of a nonprofit organization, which has some IRS tax rules and implication on how much time, effort, and money can be expended. That's part of why we don't buy dinners, buy drinks, buy anything. We show up in committee when the chairman asks. Generally, it used to be when I first started that we were here pretty much at the request of the chairman to answer questions on bills and to provide clarity on issues and background and understanding. And we've advanced kind of through that to where it's pretty much expected that the sheriffs and chiefs would come on a law enforcement related bill and offer comments and suggestions as you work the bill. We often say it's up to you to define the policy. It's up to us to figure out how to make it work. And if I can help you make it work in the process to where it turns out to be a great policy, that's my goal. Not necessarily to say yes or no. So look forward to, if you choose to do that as a topic, at least educating on the nonprofit side of the house a little bit and how those rules may apply to the discussion or may not apply to the discussion. Mr. Chairman.
All this time, I thought you didn't like me when you wouldn't buy me a drink, but any questions for Westcott? And so you think it could be part of the broader discussion on kind of political involvement? I know there are two of the topics on, C4s, on what percent of activity can be lobbying, or just kind of as part of the discussion, look at what roles, especially executive director organizations where you have a part-time lobbying function and a full-time executive function, making sure we're fitting in those parameters.
Mr. Chairman, I think it would be important to reassure the committee through the process that we don't get sideways in the process of that discussion and somehow have some collateral damage, if you will. For example, it depends upon the Attorney General whether or not they feel like we should actually register, because we don't represent anybody who has to register. Neither the sheriffs nor the chiefs have to register. So if I represent the sheriffs and chiefs, do I have to register? Becomes an interesting question. Some of the attorney generals have said yes, some have said no. Out of abundance of caution, we do. We turn in the report that says, no, we don't spend very much money. Buy lunch for the house every now and then, it appears, but other than that, no, not much, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
So more of a position to make sure that the discussion doesn't take off in a direction that would implicate us as well.
Got it. Kennedy, not seeing any questions. Thanks, Byron.
Thank you.
Mr. Schoen, welcome. I think we're going to have a very long election year on topics. So everything you would like to pursue, I know Ms. Wheeler provided election code revisions. I think you walked in just as we were mentioning those for Ms. Simmons. Anything you'd like us to take on in the interim besides redistricting?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Kai Schoen with the Secretary of State's office, and good morning, committee. I've heard a topic already discussed, and so I'll just mention it at a high level, but runoff elections is something we've had on our radar, certainly following this session, and would appreciate the opportunity to really look at all the various moving parts, because it's a pretty complicated issue, but we need to look at everything, certainly at the county level and all the activities they're already involved in, so that we can make that work. If that's what the decision of the legislature is to do, runoff elections, make it work so we can be successful with those runoff elections. Another topic of interest would be the absentee polling place timeframe. And the reason I bring this up is currently the way the statute is written is it implies that absentee polling places, maybe I should back up. So an absentee polling place, for everyone's information, it's essentially functions just like a polling place, and it's open during the absentee period time, where people can actually cast an absentee ballot, as we call it, into an actual tabulator, as opposed to filling out an absentee ballot, putting it in an envelope and delivering it to the clerk or putting it in the mail. It's an ability to actually vote like you would at a polling place, but it's during the absentee period. It's a little bit nuanced. It's not technically early voting. However, the reason for bringing this issue is the 45 days that they're required to have an absentee polling place open. Especially between a primary and a general election, there's very little time currently to get your ballots printed, to get the election media that has to be stored in the tabulators, to have your public testing prior to that general election. It's such a rush time frame. And if you decided to change some of the language in our statute, it could provide a little bit of flexibility for the counties not to be so rushed to get those public testings done and be able to still allow absentee polling places, just a little smaller time frame. And that doesn't mean absentee voting itself would be narrowed in its time frame, but just the absentee polling place itself. And so that's, I know, of interest to the county clerks, again, for that short time frame, but specifically between the primary and general election. Should I continue, Mr. Chairman, or any questions on that? Okay.
Yep, keep going.
Okay, the other topic we'd like to bring has to do with campaign finance and its clarifications essentially for organizations as well as for PACs. And one of the ideas that we would like to see considered is requiring organizations to form. Currently, PACs form, candidate committees form before they can do any type of political activity. And with organizations, there's none of that requirement in the law. If they conduct, as you know, independent expenditures or electioneering communications, they're required to file campaign finance reports. We don't even know that's happening yet until basically something might hit your mailbox or whatnot. But this would require them to form just like every other political active entity in our campaign finance statutes, or in the election code, I should say. The other aspect to the campaign finance clarifications is with regards to PACs. There's a provision in our law that says PACs need to file essentially if they've expended any funds in a primary, general, special election. And it makes it difficult to regulate who needs to file, who doesn't need to file, with that language in there, where if they just had to file zeros, which I'm sure some of you have done on your candidate reports or your committee reports, then we would know that these, each PAC or committee would have to file. And therefore, when we have to give administrative orders for those that don't file, it just takes away that ambiguity. Should we be issuing an order? I don't know. Have they expended any funds? I don't know. They're an existing PAC. What are they doing? We don't know. Oh, they filed zeros. Okay, they're fine. It just makes it easy to regulate that campaign finance provision in our law. And so that's all that I would have to offer to the committee, and would certainly answer any questions about those topics or any other topic you wish.
Okay, questions for the Secretary of State's office, Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Schoen, in that same area, how about the fines section when people are in violation? I know we've had some conversation off and on about when someone does violate, there's just one fine versus sequential fines with multiple violations, that maybe that would deter someone versus the single fine, the accumulation of fines. Any thoughts on maybe making some change as long as you're going into the organizations and the campaign finance? Is any thoughts on that?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, Representative Duncan, we currently in the statute, the fine is per report that's not filed. And if they do not file the report and we do send that administrative order and they don't send us a reconsideration and a good reason as to why we should reconsider that fine, it does accrue interest until that's actually paid and the report is filed. But that is something that we could certainly, look into. I'm not sure the mechanics of how that would work, but certainly we'd be working in the campaign finance practices. So.
Okay, Representative Ayer, then we'll go to Senator Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Schoen, when a candidate files or forms a committee for their election, then they have some reporting requirements beyond the election cycle, as I understand it. But if a candidate doesn't form a committee, just their individual, do we need something guiding what happens to those funds following the end of the election cycle?
Mr. Schoen and your
Mr. Chairman,
thoughts?
Representative Air. Yeah, specific to candidates, that would be certainly, I guess, a decision of this committee here, if that's something you want to look into, because currently, as you said, for candidates following an election year, there is no provision of what they do with those remaining funds. And there's no more reporting required for them as the way it's currently written. Whereas again, candidate committees, they're ongoing. And so they do file those reports in those odd years. And so that could be something to consider if that's something that the committee would want to do for sure.
Senator Scott.
Mr. Chairman, question on our principal topic. When do we expect the census data to be available for redistricting?
Mr. Schoen, if you know.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott, I have not looked recently, and the last I heard was in September. I know the original date was the end of, well, last month, yesterday, but I believe it's in September, but I'm not certain.
That's what we've been told as well. Okay. And does that data go to you directly? I don't even know how the data comes to the state of Wyoming. If it comes through our legislative service office, it goes to the Secretary of State, it gets published and we get it at the same time everybody else does. Anybody know? Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, it does not come to our office, but it does work its way to the counties and then we work with them on that. So.
Well, if we get it before you get it, we'll share it. Same. All
Mr.
right.
Mr.
Senator
Chairman,
Scott, go ahead.
following up on that, do we have plans through the Legislative Service Office to get the analytic support we're going to need to analyze that data and use it, create plans?
Yeah, I believe so. They bought the software and we have so many licenses to do the map planning. And I think LSO is pretty well ramped up behind the scenes when we get the information. Ted, do you have any other information on what we have ready to go and who's doing it from the LSO?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any additional information regarding the specific software that the LSO has acquired for redistricting. Mr. Michael Swank is on the Zoom call, and I know he's helping to lead up the LSO effort on redistricting. So if he has additional information, he can pop up, but otherwise we can work with the committee over the next few months to get this all going.
Will be 9 months of nonstop fun. Mr. Swank, any information you can provide on redistricting?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'm going to be the lead GIS analyst for the redistricting project. I believe Mr. Schoen is correct. The last information that was provided to the states is that the primary data will be delivered to the states by September 30th of this year. There was a notice a few weeks ago that the Census Bureau may provide some what they call legacy data, which would be old data in the old format by the middle to end of August for states that desire it sooner. But so you're looking at the August to September timeframe before that data will be provided. And then on the last question, I believe you had, the data, I believe, goes directly to the governor's office and to the legislative leadership. And then we work with all the stakeholders to disperse that data thereafter.
Okay, so nobody plan a vacation in October? Yeah.
Chairman, Mr. Swank, the software LSO's purchased, can you go over it just very briefly? Is it a one piece that you folks are on, or is it going to be something that we all can sit down on a laptop and work around?
Mr. Chairman, right now we have individual license for LSO. I don't know, I have not been part of any discussions about whether we will be getting any sort of enterprise license for the public or legislators specifically to utilize that data. But that would be something that we would need to, I guess, be discussed with either management council or legislative leadership and the LSO director.
Perfect. Thank you. Last time it took weeks to get to where you could actually navigate to the LSO website.
And Mr. Chairman, I do hope when the LSO can get that data, they can provide us with hard copy of the information by census block and a map of where the census blocks are. We're small enough so you can do a redistricting plan by hand with that data, and I have done a number of them.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Case.
Mr. Chairman, I definitely got to defend what we did last time. LSO worked really hard to make that it was a very cumbersome program and they made it available and the public could even use it. Now, there were some members of this legislature that chose not to use that data and provided their own redistricting plans outside of the model. And so that we couldn't even work with that, to tell you the truth. But it'll be so much better now with the platforms will be more readily available. You'll be able to manipulate it yourself. But last time, it was amazing what we did. We were way ahead of any other state.
All right, any other questions for the Secretary of State? It's going to be a busy year all around. All right, thanks, Kai.
Thank you.
Mr. Bush, anything? Sir, come on down.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Joe Mulberry. I'm the Deputy Commissioner in the Wyoming Division of Banking, and I'm here on behalf of Commissioner Faulkner and the Wyoming Collection Agency Board to request an interim topic of amending the statutory requirements that tie our office and the Collection Agency Board together and establishing the board as a standalone body. This item is listed on page 4 of your handouts. Under a Title II statutory transfer in 1996, the Wyoming Collection Agency Board was transferred to the Department of Audit's Banking Division, whereby our office provides certain licensing and administrative functions for the board. This creates a somewhat inefficient and ineffective method of operating for both our office and the board. Commissioner Faulkner met with members of the board to discuss this proposed interim topic, and both the board and our office agree that this move could be beneficial for our agencies and also the collection agency industry operating in Wyoming. The Collection Agency Board is a non-general fund agency supported by fees it collects from the companies engaged in business in this industry. So if the change were to occur to make them a standalone body, it would not have any impact on the general fund for the state. We would anticipate needing an hour in one of the upcoming interim meetings to present this proposal in a more detailed fashion, and then no more than 2 hours in a subsequent meeting to present and discuss the draft legislation if it's created. So, Mr. Chairman, that's the proposal. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Milbury, are you also bringing this to the Minerals Committee? And go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I don't believe so.
So in 2009 or 10, the Minerals Committee did the interim topic on Collection Agency Board, and that was a very long, complicated bill for a very simple issue that it was amazing that the Collection Agency Board could be so controversial on who the members were and how long. I think it was on the terms of office at that point. Okay, so Minerals already meet committee? Representative Duncan, they did? Okay. Sort of. Didn't the Minerals interim topics? Okay, and it wasn't brought up. Other questions for Mr. Mulberry? Seeing none, thank you. Representative Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee. Draw your attention to the bottom of page 8, requester non-applicable topic requested by legislator. So, but this has to do with the House Bill 72, which kept getting pushed away. So anyway, I just request that pop up on the list if time permits.
Okay, and members for the Senate, it was House Bill 74?
72.
72, and I think I had on the list, if time allowed, maybe 5 times, and we just never had time allow. And I knew there were some issues on both sides, and it probably wasn't going all the way this year, but it certainly was an issue, and just my apologies for not getting to it with all the other bills this year.
Yeah. So totally understandable.
Okay.
Thank you.
Questions? Seeing none. Thank you, Representative Sweeney. County Commissioners, nothing, Jim, Jeremiah? Okay. Mr. Representative Sherwood?
Good morning. Chairman and committee, Representative Ted Banks and I had put together a proposal that was initially heard in TRW, and it was recommended that we also present it here. And so as you see that you have a consideration for service and improvement districts or water and sewer, we would also ask that the committee would consider broadening that conversation to include the role that community development districts might play or would play in supporting and growing our local economies. Specifically, how the intersection of arts and culture and place-based economic development could be structured and funded at the local level through the formation of a special district. I can go into more detail, but I know there's other folks in the audience that want to comment on this.
Okay.
All right, I'm happy to take questions as well.
Senator Nethercutt is so excited that community development districts might come back, as am I. Because before your time, Representative Sherwood, we had a
3 years.
3 years, and it would get through one body and not the other, and then the other around, and
Well, now I'm here to help.
which is good, because I think
I have hope.
one year the minority leader killed it on us. So okay,
That'd be
certainly,
great.
that'd be great. And then, but TRW does have it on their list of topics, or
They suggested in terms of the scope of it being a special district, that maybe that it would find a better home here, but it crosses multiple sectors in terms of economic development. There's the minerals component, right?
There's bills drafted.
Oh, let's go. Let's
that
go.
that are brilliant.
Senator Case is excited about it too, I can tell.
He loves the bill.
Kids and kids.
Senator Case loves the bill.
All right, Representative Sherwood.
Shows it every
Oh, tourism improvement district. I forgot about those.
Kids.
It's been a long sordid history in corporations, but
If we
many of
need-
us love those and many of us don't like those ideas, but
Yeah, chair and committee, if we need to rebrand the title, communication, whatever, as a freshman coming in, I realize I don't have the backstory, but I do have the enthusiasm to help.
that's more than most of us have anymore in this legislature. Enthusiasm. All right, questions for Representative Sherwood? Not seeing you. Thank you very much. I'll put it on the list. We'll talk about it here in a second. Ms. Taylor, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Good morning. My name is Erin Taylor. I'm here to follow up on what you just heard from Representative Sherwood, representing the Wyoming Arts Alliance, arts advocates from across the state. This idea, kind of more in the cultural districts, other states have them. I know it does fit in kind of with this broader category. This is something that this group is going to have a conversation about at their April statewide forum. And it's something that we've been trying to kick around for years because, when economies are in a state of decline, we look for opportunities and partnerships. And we think that this is something that could offer our communities another tool in their toolbox. And so we're interested in this, whatever it may look like. Happy to help. Again, with what you heard from Representative Sherwood, just the topic of a special district, what's considered. I know there's moving parts. There's lots of people that need to be involved and what that looks like. And so probably this committee is the best committee to have that conversation, and you've done it before.
Yeah. All right. Any questions for Erin? Nothing else? Railroads, wine, education?
Well, Mr. Chairman, with my community college hat on, I thought I would offer if there's anything that, we have an association for representing the trustees and for the community colleges. It's a C6. And if there's any information that I could provide to the committee, how we operate, reporting, all of that kind of stuff, we operate like any other C6. And I just saw that kind of mentioned in this one of these topics, but happy to provide any information for the committee.
And I know we'll talk about all the other topics, but one of them is, I think it's actually on page 1. You got to be first, is on public sector lobbying and what the regulations should be.
Missed out. They went after UW. They left you alone.
Well, yeah. All right. Any other questions, Ms. Taylor? Seeing none. Thank you, Erin. Representative Wharf, we kind of went around the room and and tracked behind you and then you sat in front. So if you wanted to talk, if you're ready, and if not, I'll give you some more time. Yep, not a problem. Mr. Kaysen, anything? Mr. Pickard? Ms. Lee, welcome to Corporations. But in a new role, apparently.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Kristen Lee, and today I'm representing Upslope Media, which is a media digital platform company that publishes news online. And our request is that the committee study this, and as we move into a digital age of how people consume their news and access their news, and come up with a definition of qualified online news provider. There's a little bit to look at here, but we think as we change technologically how we get our news, it just needs something that needs to be addressed, especially in the public domain.
News
Thank you.
provider. So they
Yes,
could
thank
use a
you.
shield law. Senator Scott.
Chairman, with the freedom of the press laws we have, why do we need to do anything? Can't anybody organize any news thing they want to and proceed?
Ms. Lee, if you want it, then we can share our thoughts. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Scott. Well, what I didn't say was that my client would like to be eligible to be designated as a provider, so that when cities, counties, school districts have to publish meetings and notices, that they can be included in consideration and bid for those government mandated notices.
You sit through and look at online media, how many people are reading stories? It's impressive.
Including Twitter feeds about us.
I don't represent a Twitter company. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Other questions, Ms. Lee? Seeing none, thank you very much, Kristen. Mr. Moline, what brings the Farm Bureau to corporations, elections, and political subdivisions? That's what brings them to revenue. Corporations.
Mr. Chairman, Brett Moline, Wyoming Farm Bureau. I'm glad I'm in corporations because there's some bills that I like, some topics that I will support. I know it'll surprise some of you, but the topic on page 1 about the lobbying, it's often been a question, why do state agencies take a position on a bill? And why does a university have a lobbyist? That's questions from my members. On page 7, the primary election runoffs, we would definitely support that, where a person has to get a majority of the vote to move on into the election. And then a topic I'm not very well versed on, but it's on page 10 and then also on page 11 about the state sovereignty, auditing the federal government. That'd be a topic that we would like to see go forward. With that, Mr. Chairman, supporting some items that are in front of a committee gladly. I would sit for any questions.
All right. Any questions for the Farm Bureau? Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Moline. Ms. Urbicite, can't imagine you have anything to bring to corporations. How is the real estate world these days?
Mr. Chairman, the real estate world is doing well. So
Excellent.
I'm Lori Urbicay with the, and I'm representing several clients. So we'll just use my company name, ACMS. And our topic that we'd really like to visit with you about in more depth is the local ordinance impact on commerce and how it relates to the state revenue picture. And it starts on page 4. We had Senate File 125 this year. It was maybe too broad. It didn't fare well in the Senate. And so we think we should look at that again, refining it. And then as we did more study on this, we also found that some states are attacking this question as a reverse mandate legislation. So basically, if municipalities or counties are enacting ordinances or regulations that are impacting the state budget, then maybe there should be some offset. So we'd like to just visit some more about that. And of course, if you want to talk subdivisions, I'll be here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions for the realtors? Or for any, okay, thanks. This guys are already, any other public comment in person here, and then we're gonna go to the internet. So I'm gonna, if you do have something for the committee and you want to talk, I'm gonna bring you into the room. But that would require you to raise your hand. First up, we're gonna have Mr. Lindstrom, who I believe is from Cheyenne and the Arts Alliance. Go ahead, Mr. Lindstrom, floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning to you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I'll be brief. I'm just going to provide additional support for the idea of a creative cultural district discussion within this committee. It obviously, as Representative Sherwood and Ms. Taylor represented, it cuts across so many different boundaries. And while I serve Arts Cheyenne, the local nonprofit arts agency for Cheyenne and Laramie County, I'm also part of an informal creative and cultural districts working group that's made up of community-based economic developer representatives, arts representatives from Casper, Sheridan, Powell, Jackson, Rock Springs, and Laramie. And we feel that our conversations, which Representative Sherwood and for that matter, Representative Banks have sat in on a couple of occasions, has allowed us to understand at least what the environment can be to apply what cultural and creative districts in other parts of the country represent and what they can do here. Clearly, there are thousands of jobs, almost $1 billion in direct sales activities from existing creative businesses across the state. We think we can do better. And so it's great that we can perhaps take an opportunity to take a look at how perhaps a special purpose district environment can benefit. Ms. Taylor mentioned it, I'll re-represent it. We're members of as well of the Wyoming Arts Alliance. They have a presentation scheduled for next week, April 8th at 1:30 online. You can go to the Wyoming Arts Alliance website, wyomingarts.org, and register for that event. We have representatives from several states in the Western region who have creative district environments and are going to talk in depth about how it works for them. So we hope you have an opportunity to do that. You haven't collapsed too far from the end of the session, and you can perhaps get online and take a look at that. That'll help you, I think, with your study. And with that, I just want to say again, appreciate the opportunity to re-endorse the topic of creative districts discussion within this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lindstrom. Thoughts? I like calling them creative districts. That might sound better. Community development sounded good. Tourism improvement, creative districts. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Lindstrom.
Thank you.
Ms. Langford with the county clerks, you're up next.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm Mary Langford, and I have the honor of representing the county clerks of the state of Wyoming. And I'm just here to reiterate the fact that we plan to be actively involved in the redistricting effort. Once that information is available to the state, we will be involved also in the election code revisions that the Secretary of State's office will bring forth. We did ask for interim study of runoff elections, and we're at the ready to work on that as well. So we don't have anything that we're really bringing to you that we request, but we'll be supporting the things that the Secretary of State's office has presented to you already. And I'm happy to stand for any questions or comments. And thank you for the opportunity today.
Questions for the county clerks? Seeing none. It's always nice seeing you, Ms. Langford. Ms. Kirchhofer, you're up. Welcome to Corporations.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me here. My name is Jennifer Kirchhofer, and I'm a resident of Albany County. I would like to propose a topic of the discussion of siting of renewable energy projects with particular emphasis on wind projects. I know the legislature has passed a law last year to regulate the siting of renewables, but we shouldn't let another year go by without review and addressing the new information about the impacts of these industries on communities and landscapes. As an individual in Albany County who's watched this rail tie project unfold, it's blatantly clear that residents are struggling at the hands of wind developers. Local residents are being forced to research and navigate through county and state regulations, as well as the myriad of health and safety risks forced on them by industrial wind turbines. County officials just do not have the time to do this adequately themselves. I've personally gone to the Roundhouse project and spoken with individual residents living underneath the turbines. And until our Wyoming legislators can personally witness what these industrial wind projects are doing to our natural and historical resources, as well as the health and safety of our rural residents, we'll continue to get steamrolled. We need to guide this development so we preserve those aspects of Wyoming we love most. Kansas has introduced a statewide legislation to give smaller communities more support. Quotes from an article about this state: "No other small community should have to go through the same hardships that we have over the past 2 years. And our community seriously has wounds that will probably never heal. We should learn from them." This is exactly what Albany County is going through right now. We're up to at least 4 separate groups obtaining legal counsel to protect themselves from insufficient or lacking regulations, and have a large team of residents who've researched for over a year. We felt this was absolutely necessary because wind developers are skilled at negotiations which favor themselves while hurting Wyoming. With the promise of large payoff, county officials are easily swayed to sell out. We have to ask ourselves, how many industrial wind and solar projects will be enough? Because we really only have 2 choices. We can do nothing and keep approving ill-sited projects which threaten all that makes Wyoming great, or make the much needed regulation changes to properly site projects and create a balance between the 2 while we still have the choice. We should know how we want to tailor wind and solar projects to eliminate or at least reduce and mitigate their negative effects on our land, communities, and wildlife. And when the good site is found, we need to take great care when they affect adjacent landowners, historic sites and trails, and important winter ranges for antelope, pronghorn, and elk. As these projects have been developed across the country, much more information has become available about issues like tower collapse, flicker, effects of infrasound, ice throw, fire risk, and how we can adequately protect our Wyoming's night skies. Please support including this topic in the committee's interim work. We need to figure out the best way for Wyoming to work with these industries to build our economy, but also make sure we don't suffer unintended consequences to harm tourism, or as I noted above, destroy what we love most about this state. I understand budget issues, but investing in people is the best way to be successful. Selling out our best assets for short-term gains always has and always will be the path to failure. So I appreciate your consideration with this topic.
Thank you, Ms. Kirchhofer. And then committee, that is on page 13 and 14 of the topics you have in front of you. Any questions? Not seeing any at this time. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Mr. Neal, you're up. There we go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate the opportunity. I'm representing the Wyoming Energy Forum today. We just want to express our support for the idea of reviewing the 2020 law to regulate these industrial renewable projects. We think it doesn't make sense to wait another year before we see how these things are working. The information around these issues is developing quickly. So we think it's really worth your time. And then I think among other things that should be added to those considerations is how the state can figure out how it would designate places that would not be available for these big industrial projects. I've mentioned to several of the committee members that for me, for example, I'd hate to see a big project at Red Rim, which we all know is a crucial winter range for one of our great pronghorn herds. So with that, I hope you'll endorse this topic and we'd be happy to participate in it over the coming months. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Neal. Committee, Representative Duncan, was there any discussion in minerals about this topic yesterday? Historically, Corp has not really done the industrial siting. I should say historically in my tenure. I know there are 2 people who have been here much longer than I have, but I don't know, did it get brought up at minerals at all?
Mr. Chairman, not much
Okay.
was brought up publicly in the joint interim meeting, but there was a bill that was discussed for industrial siting. It did not pass. There was more work that needed to be done on it, and the topic is on the list to potentially be discussed for minerals.
Is it? Okay.
Yes.
Other questions, committee? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Mr. Neal.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure. Ms. Herman. Welcome to corporations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just really briefly, for the League of Women Voters, we did not submit any interim topic suggestions, but I just two things I would like to say that, like the county clerks, the league has always been involved in the redistricting interim work, and I know you guys are going to get a late start with the late access to the data, but we want to help any way we can at exposing the ideas to the public and getting people excited about weighing in on that. We also have an idea for multi-member districts, which I will share later, but also the idea of a runoff, which has been suggested to your list already. I would simply like to add that the league is interested in exploring other options, for instance, including but not exclusively ranked choice voting. So I hope if you take that up in the interim, you would expand the look at other methods for primary elections. And that's it.
Questions for the League of Women Voters? Not. Oh, yeah, Senator Case, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The idea of multi-member districts was something that a few of us had talked about in a couple of different times. And it might involve things like having, say, 2 senators and 4 House members elected at large from a district. And just to put this forward a little bit, I don't know if that's how it would work, but it might. If you look at these composites down the hallway and you just choose one indicator, let's choose the number of female members. You will find that with redistricting in single member districts, the number of female members of this legislature began to drop off quite rapidly. And why is that? I have no idea. You know, you could speculate that it's cultural. It's about way that people don't like to combat one-on-one between the differences between the sexes. I don't know, but it is true. And we certainly in Fremont County had some great representations when we had more at large, because you can put your name on, and if you're one of the top 4, for example, it's not a combative one-on-one, and it might soften our elections a little bit, make it so there might be some merit in looking at that. This might be the time.
Well, and Mr. Chairman, I completely agree. Once again, we don't know, what drives the current reluctance of people to run. I remember the days when we had a horse race in Laramie County of 9 or 10 people, and certainly you had a big turnout for that. But the option you just mentioned, or an option where, because we had this nested setup of a district with 1 senator and 2 at-large representatives. So a lot of ways to look at that, but I think it does bear looking at. So I agree with you.
I wrote my master's thesis on such things, so that'd be a great topic for us to discuss. Other questions from Ms. Herman? Representative or Senator Scott?
Mr. Chairman, on that last point, that would be an issue we could talk about at our first meeting before we have any numbers, and talk about the principles. And I think also at a first meeting, it would be very useful to go over the court precedents and what we're up against legally. And before the last time, one of the things we did was essentially divide the state up into regions and say, this region can be self-contained, or this region can be self-contained if we add so much population to it or subtract so much population. And that resulted in a lot of the actual drawing of the maps being done very locally with county clerks and legislative delegations from those areas. And frankly, that worked very well, and I hope we would repeat that.
Okay. Agreed. And I think on the House side, we talked about yesterday that we probably should have some meetings to set ground rules before we see the numbers, and then we can hold the ground rules and agreements before we start having to make some difficult decisions. All right, other questions for League of Women Voters? Seeing none. Thank you, Marguerite.
All right, thank you.
So I think that covers everyone online who wanted to speak. If not, raise your hand. I know there's a couple other people in the waiting room. I'm not sure if they're watching or want to testify yet. Let me check with the audience one more time. Mr. McLaurin, you walked in. Anything from WHAM? Okay, Representative Wharf, come on down.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would stand before you today in support of, we had a bill that was entitled the Wyoming Sovereignty Act. It was House Bill 256. It did not receive any movement from the House. It was presented to the House Corporations Committee and didn't go anywhere. So it's one of the things we would like, as you recall, it's a pretty involved topic. We spent 1.5 years working on that. But we would like to see that picked up as an interim topic. I think we see actions today that are concerning with the federal government, maybe exercising authorities that are outside their scope and authority. And, you know, just reflecting, I mean, one time we had, before the passage of the 17th Amendment, that was kind of the charge of the US Senate, was to protect states' rights. And we've changed that whole process. So those people are now elected by the people rather than the legislature. And so to me, that's one of the things that's been lost is the states really don't have any organized process whereby they can stand up and push back against expansion of federal government. And so that's the purpose that we would like to suggest the corporations look at this. I think it is important that the state of Wyoming figure out how we can address actions that you know, we've seen twice in our lifetime, changes in the administration on the president's scale, that we have seen a direct attack on our economy. And I think it's a big problem that we need to address. So I would ask this body to consider this as an interim topic. And I guess I'd answer any questions that you may have.
Representative Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Worf, you said "we" several times when you started your presentation. Who is "we"?
Well, as I mentioned, there was a committee that was put together. It was a subcommittee out of, I can't remember what year, it was 1.5 years ago, that the Republican Party put together a task force to look at this. And so of the counties, I think there's 23 counties, 19 of them were represented in that committee. But that was one of the things. This is not an effort from the party to do anything. We definitely looked at this. It's called the Republic Review, is what it's referred to on a national level. But that is the "we" to which I'm referring, because obviously I didn't do this by myself. There's a lot more people involved. It's a very involved topic.
Thank you, Representative.
You bet.
Other questions for Representative Worf? Okay, seeing none.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, with that committee, I think that covered everybody who is here publicly, online and in person. So we'll just close public comment. I did just want to go through the list of topics in front of you in case some weren't talked about. I know some were brought by members of the committee. So if it's okay, we'll just go page by page. And I think Representative McGuire has the first one up. And so Representative McGuire, I didn't know if you wanted to talk about the government sector lobbyist anymore. Really not putting you on the spot, but if you wanted to share some thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for putting the most pressing issue at the beginning of the packet. The concept is that most states do not allow it because most states have a budget that is fairly set and the same. And so the concept is that, for example, if you're talking about $1 million budget, if one department gets more from that budget than the other department, well, was it because of the merits or was it because of the persuasiveness of the lobbyist? And, you know, obviously most states and the federal government feel that the allocation of funds should be based on the merits of the case and the merits of the department. Also, it's disturbing because here in the state of Wyoming, the actual guidelines are in the 1997 executive order, which I would submit I doubt anybody has seen that 1997 executive order. And then it was followed up by a memo from the AG's office that specifically excluded one of our larger departments, which, you know, again, I just, one of the things that I always stress is I think everybody should be treated the same. And I think if one department is able to lobby, well, everybody should be able to lobby. Or if we say nobody can lobby, then that should be the same. And I think we also need to address, because we have associations that have been formed in order to counteract departments that are lobbying. And I just think that we need to have a set of ground rules and everybody play by the same rule and it be fair for everyone. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I would just say, you all know I bring controversial bills, and it was difficult for me this year. We had roadkill. It passed the House, just so you all know. But it is interesting when you have a state agency that can't lobby, but you have a collection of that state agency who take time off from the agency and they can lobby. So Game Wardens Association, I always found it interesting. State School Board Association, right? They're being paid with government funds to their local school districts, and then they use those funds. I don't think in the model anywhere there's any line for money to, you know, lobbying organizations, but they came and hit me pretty hard on a bill too this year, I thought was. And it's tough in judiciary. WASCOP is actually funded from local sheriffs and chiefs and county funds. You're not funded from local. Where are you funded from, Mr. Odekoven? If you know.
Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, we receive a number of state, federal, and independent grants. Proceeds from that, profit, if you will, will be utilized for those. Governmental funds go into that budget. Our government do receive go right back to our public training.
Yeah. Things I didn't know. I just assumed every sheriff's office and chief put in some funding, but same with the County and Prosecuting Attorneys Association. Do you know? It seems interesting they get to lobby and the public defenders don't, but Senator Nethercott?
Mr. Chairman, they don't have a lobbyist. They volunteer the very little time that they have to provide, I would say, information on bills, particularly criminal bills, ensuring that they work and are accurate. I don't know that they've ever lobbied for anything. I think they're only, you know, one elected official, you know, came before the committee asking for the cap on the salaries to be eliminated. That was a pretty direct request, and I wouldn't consider it a lobbying effort. So they don't have an association. And neither do the Public Defender's Office, but they can't find the time either to provide any kind of input on the bills. So despite my request to have them come, maybe give some feedback for informational purposes to the committee. So occasionally that happens, but rarely. So both of those agencies and groups are tacked for time with no lobbyists.
Nice.
Defense of my people.
Other questions on that topic? Insurance we covered. I'm just going through the tablet. There's a proposed interim topic. Representative Blackburn, you didn't have anything on secession under your name. Don't know where it came from. Didn't want to talk about it. Got it. And then so the one on page. Page 3 was on what's called dark money, and I know everybody I think on this committee remembers we've had a couple resolutions to overturn Citizens United, but there has been increasing issues with out-of-state groups funding in interesting ways, getting around our campaign finance laws, or just not reporting, especially when we talk about independent expenditures. And so the Wyoming Promise Group, which is a statewide nonprofit, I believe, would like us to look when we go through the rest of our election laws on, you know, if there are better ways to have more transparency and accountability on some of that money coming in and how it's being spent and what we regulate and what we don't. So I put that under my name because I think it's still a prevalent topic. Every election cycle seems to get more worrisome on outside influence. And other states saw it 20 years ago, and Wyoming, I think, has been protected from a lot of it until recently. And we're joining the rest of the country on some pretty hostile campaigning. So that would be an issue to look at. Talked about collection agency board, local ordinances. Representative Obermuller's not here. He had the idea that people who have to report personal property should file with the Secretary of State and pay the same, a similar type fee to register their business, and that would bring in a lot of additional funding. I told him he could encourage and come this morning, but I don't see him. So that, I don't know if he brought it to a different committee, but I told him he could put it on my name. Hey, Senator Boner, welcome back. And then the review of major political parties from Representative McGuire. I don't know if you want to talk about that, Representative McGuire, I can.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd be happy to talk about that. And it was mentioned there was a committee that was formed that didn't include all of the counties of a particular political party. And everybody here has, well, with the exception of a couple, have received a massive number of emails. And I can tell you, I've been going to every state convention since I was a kid and working as a courier. And many of the things that we get emails and direction on have never been discussed at the state convention. And there have never been a platform established or a resolution or anything. Yet we seem to get all this direction, which looks suspiciously like lobbying. And that's just, I think that there should be, we need to look at that and say, what are the rules?
And I think we've had at least 2 political parties this year have, I'm not sure, I guess I would call it lobbying, and I don't know where in our law that's clearly defined of if you have to register as a lobbyist and do a fee and wear a badge, and if that's different as a political party or not. Now that we do have a third party that's operating, I think everyone knows the Libertarian Party had 1 or 2 assistants that were sent on behalf of the National Party to assist the Libertarian member in the House. And they did email, members of the House, and I would assume that would be lobbying, but they didn't register as lobbyists. So there are some issues there that we just need to tighten up or have a discussion on what the expectation is when it comes to political parties and emails and appearing in front of committees. Thoughts on that, committee? Okay. What? It'll be great fun, I'm sure. We talked about runoff elections or primary elections or ranked choice or whatever we need to do, but I mean, I think everybody who's been here, we don't have any freshmen on corporations. I mean, you're all aware of, what? You have a freshman? You're not, oh, you're a freshman to the committee. You're not a freshman on the, but it just, we are increasingly becoming a one-party state where the primary election is our election. And, we had a thing in my county, we had 24 people running for county commissioner for 2 seats, and they won with 9% and 8%. And they were I mean, there seems like there is not a fairness aspect to that, and we could do something if it's a runoff or some better primary process as we continue to, have the primary be our election in Wyoming. I think we do need to just understand that has ramifications and ensure that, the electoral voice is heard. And we're hearing it from both parties. I don't even think it's a partisan issue anymore. We have people in the Republican Party, the dominant party of our state, that don't feel that it's fair. And so when you're hearing the outcry from just about everybody, it's probably time we look at that, is my opinion. Runoff, digital platforms, water sewer districts, is there election code? I'm looking through everything else. We talked about state sovereignty, the federalism topic. I think Representative Wharf is generally in line with the state sovereignty topic that's brought on page 10, page 11. Generally the same issue. What is Wyoming doing to, push back or defend our ground against the federal government? Do we need to have, a committee dedicated to that? Do we need to reinstitute, some safeguards? Do we need to task our Attorney General? What are we doing in the current administration to really protect ourselves from a whole lot of onslaught that's coming? We could not be here on page 12 for third-party self-generation. We talked about that in revenue, talked about it in minerals. Certainly, if we want to delve into energy issues this interim, after last interim, we are welcome to do so. But it's an issue out there that cost of electricity is going down. I do think minerals is taking most of the PSC bills and the coal bills, so that might be better for minerals. And just so the committee knows, on page 13, recall of elected officials. Representative Bear brought a bill to be able to recall county and city officials. It went on a 4-5 vote in the House. But I did hear from 8 or 9 people around the state in various communities that they would like that, and it could be something we consider. And then the only other thing on the bottom of page 14, I think the Senate, no offense, didn't pass Representative Larson's public depository bill for Shoshone. Most of us have seen that bill for a decade now. If you don't have a bank within 10 or 20 miles, can you use a credit union? 30 some states allow credit unions to be public depositories. Wyoming is not one of them. We keep getting in the same kind of fight on a bill. And so it was brought up, I think they put under my name, that, could we just study in the interim? What are the pros? What are the cons? Instead of getting both sides here for 5 minutes, yelling at each other, and really say, can Wyoming benefit from having credit unions be public depositories? So with that committee, those are all the topics.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Case.
I'm sorry, I sort of missed the
Third party self-gen?
well, there's just all the utility stuff. It's kind of bigger than, it is the explosive development of renewable energy, which we can benefit from. It's a transition of our electric utility industries. It's, just a lot going on here. And this committee, I know other committees might kind of want to work at it, but there's some unique expertise here in this committee that we could leverage just to keep the kind of the utility issues open and moving forward. I hope we would. And the world's changing. It's just, you look outside on the hillside out there, go to Gillette, you're just seeing change, and we are stuck in change. And if Wyoming's not paying attention to the change, we're going to lose. And I just think it's important that this committee look at it. You got Representative Ayer there, who's an expert in this area. You've got others. So hope you would keep that online.
So,
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, Senator Nethercott.
I would just like to pile on to Senator Case's comments. I do think that this committee has significant expertise on the topic. It's always been a topic in the 5 years that I've served on the committee, and know that work is important. And I would be disappointed to know that institutional knowledge and the work that we've done would just now be changed as we focus on some of these other issues. I think that it's important that the committee continue that work, and we prioritize this ever-changing landscape for utilities.
So, Mr. Co-Chairman, we have about 17 issues that I either wrote down or on. I'm not sure every committee does this differently. Senator Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, it seems to me when we look overall here, the primary thing we've got to do is to redistrict. That really has to be topic number one. And I think we have spotted some things we can look at before we get the numbers. And I strongly recommend an educational piece on what the law is and the principles we've got to deal with. Discussion ahead. I think we ought to limit what we do in the other areas, give priority to that redistricting. But it does seem to me that the whole business of utility regulation and as Senator Case was articulating, some of the energy issues continue to be, and I'm recommending you put in very broad topics with discretion to the chairman to fill in some of the details. Utility regulation, election laws, to the extent the Secretary of State of the county clerks have things that they need done that are going to affect particularly the coming election. So that does tie into the redistricting part. We've always responded to requests from there, and it's always generated something. It wasn't clear to me whether we really have anything on the insurance traditionally in our jurisdiction. But if the NAIC comes up with some new model law, we have to have same accreditation. But if you put in those broad topics and say the concentration is going to be on redistricting, I think you have a proper report to go forward.
I absolutely agree with that. You got redistricting elections, probably the one you didn't touch. We've got 2 or 3 on the service districts. Potentially take a little look, but there's generally 3 or 4 broad themes away there. I really think we need to leave the topics extremely wide open. Management Council has continued to try to focus these in, and it boxes you in. And I think we need to leave them very broad.
If only we had someone on Management Council to stop that.
Well, I've been about 0 and 198 on the Management Council. I do vote, but I don't usually win.
Okay, Senator Case, and historically, you and I, co-chairman in the old days of this committee, kept it very broad, 3 issues with sub-issues, and
I
we
think
always got it
you
through.
create fishing licenses that are as broad as you can get, and then you refine it as you go along. And definitely defer to the chairs in my mind to try to figure this out. If people have ranked priorities, I will say that it is a budget session that we're going into. There's some topics that you just are not going to get the 2/3 vote to go in. Things like secession and maybe federalism. And, I'm sorry, I don't think we can get 2/3 when we get there. And that is probably a better topic for the other off year.
Okay. Is there any topic on, I think the co-chairman and I can do a fairly broad with kind of 3 issues, and I'll work on that this morning and send it out before, 2 o'clock today to everybody. And then if people have serious concerns like, oh, I want that off, or you need to add something, and we can have 7 or 8 priorities, and Management Council can, take them in our priority and drop off the last 2.
Like 4 or 5.
I was thinking, I think of broad election issues, and then with the subcategory of kind of the primary issue, and then an issue of lobbying and who is a lobbyist. And then we could do utilities, and we could just call it special districts, I guess, and do the sewer, water, and community development. Senator Scott, I love it when you look confused. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I really think you ought to hold it to no more than 5 topics. And I gave you my suggestion a minute ago, but again, redistricting has to be one. I think utility issues have to be one. Election laws, you could stop there. You could add insurance if some item that we have to deal with comes up, and just cut it off there. And frankly, in the past, Mr. Chairman, on occasion, this committee has had way too many bills and hasn't had time to work them properly, and has had trouble on the floor on account of it. I think we ought to really try to hold the number of bills and the number of subtopics under these down. And Mr. Chairman, I really think with those principles, we ought to let you 2 co-chairmen work it out and get a proposal along those lines to the Management Council.
I think that's good. Committee, we've been looking at 2 2-day meetings prior to the redistricting. So that's, unless there's anything different, there'll probably be 2. We probably will, back to what Senator Scott talked about, go into a little bit of the history. They've already sent out, I think, to most of the committee, some of the past history, if you're reading it. I know I've been sent the rules, and the last 2 redistricts, they've sent me the rules and some of the things that I think need reviewed. And then we'll probably talk at the last meeting with how many meetings we do around, depending on time, because the past 2 redistrictings, I believe that's been 8 and 10 stops. I think last time was 10, it was 8 the time before. So for everybody on the committee, be pretty awake, because those 10 days they're brutal. I followed them around. I was in the middle of it last time, and I felt sorry for the committee members, because I just came in line for an hour or 2 at a time to get.
Senator Scott, yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I would also suggest the co-chairman, you might want to get a calendar out of everybody on when they're available, not available. I know some years that's not been done. And I can remember one year where I had an impossible conflict from my other committee on every corporations committee meeting. And that resulted in considerable delay during the session.
Senator Scott, I brought a calendar with us and our dates are very narrow at this point because we've got some significant blockouts from the staff. So really, when you get into June, there's about, trying to look what month I'm on to here. Yeah, June only has a couple 2-day spots open in the whole month, which would be the 7th and 8th and the 14th and 15th. And when you get into July, then you have the 12th through the 16th is about the only time that's open in July.
We might have special sessions that week. Well, the week before.
So if it is, that makes it tough. Then you move into August and you start moving into other committees pretty good, but the windows are very narrow. I was gonna warn everybody, I sat down and calendared these out yesterday. And I said, June has just literally 2 days, 2 times for meetings. Senator Boner.
I'll just question along those lines, Mr. Chairman, if the census is going to be delayed, how much work are we going to be able to do during those months anyways, if it's delayed till the fall? Or are we just going to listen for the sake of listening without knowing how the population changes?
Senator Case.
There's a lot that has to happen before we actually get the numbers. And if we can actually agree on how we're going to do it before we get the numbers, it'll go a lot smoother. And there's just you were a little late getting here, but Senator Scott had talked about maybe reviewing the court mandates, looking at the concept of multi-member districts. What are our restrictions and just some stuff we could accomplish with a half day or so prior to getting the numbers, then we could really go forward in better shape after we get the numbers.
Senator Scott.
Yep.
Sorry.
From prior experience, a half day on redistricting, probably at the first meeting. And then if there's a second meeting before we get the numbers, an hour or two follow up because there might be some unanswered questions at the first one. So I think you can count on about that to get prepared for the redistricting. And it might be some of the second one will be a briefing on how the numbers are going to be available, what kind of format and how we can work with the LSO staff.
Back to Senator Boner. Yeah, we've got these other issues in those 2 meetings that come. We are going to vary off the past. In the past, what they've done is 1 day of redistricting, 1 day of committee meetings. And that just isn't there because of this time, but we'll use most of these 2-day meetings to do whatever we're going to do with utilities with across the board. So we'll try to have our bill drafts wrapped up basically before we start redistricting. And then unless there's objections to committee, and then we'll go on with it.
All right, with that committee, hopefully something by this afternoon inbox that is broad. And then if you have any issues, concerns, want something else on or off, we can discuss it.
We will also throw out probably 5 or 6 dates for those meetings and see what conflicts are.
Anybody have anywhere specific they want to go in the interim? I know Representative McGuire has a great place in Casper, the airport
I got
lounge
one.
for us.
I'll take one.
You want one in
I know you love
Greater
Sundance,
Crook
but we
County?
will. We probably actually will go to Ranch A, which is very secluded and off the edge. We'll see a little different place, 2 lodges there, and basically the committee can all stay on site.
Ranch A is nice for those of you. I think most of us have been there by now, but if not,
Is that acceptable to you, Mr. Co-Chairman, if we did that?
I like Ranch A. Yeah.
Or I can do Hewlett, but actually Ranch A is kind of a more unique spot for a meeting.
Okay. All right, and then we'll redo and redistricting meetings all over the state, but I'll try to get one in Hewlett, one in Casper, and maybe one down in the Bridger Valley, because we promised Representative Erwin last year and didn't quite make it, so.
And one up in the basin.
And we should definitely go to the basin.
At your own peril, try not to.
All right, with that interim committee, look forward to seeing you all in the interim and